Hi, everybody. This is Daniel, and today is the first edition of what I'm calling Foods to Become Friends with. So, over the course of the semester, I'm going to introduce you in particular to a few foods that I think that you should get to know a little bit better. And so, I just want to start off with the question of why am I doing this, or why do this in the first place? You'll see the photo in the lower right, why it's there in just a second. So first of all, I want to convey that this is not an attempt to sell anything. I haven't been paid by the nutritional yeast industry or the tofu industry or the lentil industry to sell anything. I'm not receiving any profits from any of the foods that I'm going to speak about. In fact, a lot of them are actually just very generic things that you can find in the supermarket. And so the goal here really is that I want to introduce you to foods that are low in cost in general and that have high nutritional content. So when I was a student, I didn't know about a lot of these, as I'm going to describe in just a second. And I wish I would have known about these because they're found sometimes in corners of the supermarket where I didn't know where to go at first, and then I discovered them, and I found, hey, hang on, like I can make a lot of food and not spend very much money and still have very nutritious and tasty food as well. So another reason to do this, on top of me trying to introduce you to foods that I think that will save you money in the long run, is that the full title of our course is Applied Ethics in Humanities. And there's really a sense in the ethics class that we're not just talking about theory. We're going to make it practical. We're going to bring these teachings into our lives. So talking about these foods and going through the cooking classes that we're going to, this is a really great way to apply everything that we're learning. And so if you are inclined, based on the theories that we study and the arguments that we study in this class, to adopt a more plant-based diet, either all or part of the time, it can be hard to know where to start. What am I going to replace what I was previously eating with? And so, a lot of times if you don't know where to look for a plant-based diet, then you can actually wind up being very unhealthy for a number of reasons that we'll discuss. And so as I mentioned a moment ago, I didn't know about most of the items that I'm going to discuss until well into my 20s. Well, what happened in my 20s? Ah, yes. There's an earlier version of me, still had a good head of hair back then in the Taj Mahal in India. And so, as I mentioned in this class, I spent a lot of time in India in my 20s, and it was there that I really discovered, because most of the population there is vegetarian, not necessarily by choice, but just by necessity, because vegetarian food is cheaper there. Things like lentils, that we're going to talk about in a few classes. And so it was really going to India that I discovered how much variety there could be in a plant-based diet. So I got a cookbook while I was there, and I came back to Canada and I looked at the foods that they were recommending. I found almost all of them no problem in the supermarket, and I slowly began to change the way that I cooked to resemble more of what I ate in India. And this does not always mean, spicy food all the time, just the general principles about what to cook with. So I wish I could have gone back before I was in India and known about these foods and began cooking with them, especially when I was a student, when I didn't have very much money. So the first food that I want to introduce you to, it's probably one that you have heard of and you've probably seen it in a number of different varieties, is soy. And soy is a really good place to start when you're looking at swapping out some animal-based products for some plant-based products. So I have the Harvard School of Public Health's conclusion about soy put up here. Soy is a unique food that is widely studied for its estrogenic and anti-estrogenic effects on the body. Studies may seem to present conflicting conclusions about soy, but this is largely due to the wide variation in how soy is studied. Soy is a nutrient-dense source of protein that can safely be consumed several times a week and is likely to provide health benefits, especially when eaten as an alternative to red and processed meat. So I'll talk a little bit later about some of the controversy around soy and the some of the claims in terms of its health benefits. But by and large, soy is a great protein substitute, and especially if you're not overdoing it, and especially if you're eating it in place of particularly red meat, then there's definitely going to be a lot of health benefits for you there. So let's take a look at the nutritional composition of soy. And so all of the numbers that I have up here are per 100 grams of raw soybeans. And we're going to see that soy can get transformed into a lot of different forms. But in general, the nutritional characteristics hold fairly straight across the board in terms of, you're not going to see one variety or one version of a soy product differ all that much from raw soybeans. But I just thought for the basic nutritional information, it would be best to talk about soy in its most natural state, which, as you can see up there, that's what it looks like. It's a bean. So the big thing, the big appeal about soy for people who want to adopt a plant-based diet is its protein content. So 100 grams of raw soybeans, it's not that much. I mean, it's a good size serving, but within that, you have 36 grams of protein in it, which is a huge amount. And I thought that this might be actually a good place to talk about just how much protein the human body needs, because this is one of the main concerns of people moving to a plant-based diet is, well, where am I going to get my protein? I'm not going to get enough protein, etc. So according to the governmental agencies, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Canadian authorities on health, the amount of protein that most people need is about 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight. So for the average woman, this works out to about 46, the average man, 56 grams. I'm about 70 kilos myself. I guess I'm average body weight, and that's how much protein I would need a day. Of course, individual needs are going to vary. You might be someone who has a constitution where you just need more protein, or maybe you're doing some athletic training or something like that. But usually when I put up these numbers, it comes as a surprise about actually how relatively little protein we need. If you look at the labels of what you're consuming right now, you're almost certainly getting well above this amount of protein. And I've heard in many medical studies that actually pretty much, and again, I don't want to, say that this is 100% of the time, but the conclusion seems to be for medical science that you're only protein deficient when you're calorie deficient. Meaning, if you're eating enough calories per day, then you're almost certainly getting enough protein. But for people who are really looking for a great protein substitute, look at the statistics, look at the numbers up there. You really can't get that much better than soy. In addition, there's a lot of fiber in 100 grams of soy, 9 grams of dietary fiber. Again, the recommendation is about 25 to 30 a day. So if you were to eat 100 grams of soy, you'd have a good portion, over 50% of your protein, and about a third of your dietary fiber, just in that alone, not to count any of the rice or bread or vegetables that you might be eating with it. 27% of your daily calcium intake. And this is, again, something that is surprising for a lot of people about how plant-based foods actually contain a lot of calcium in them. We might discuss some other ones later on in the class, things like sesame seeds, leafy greens like spinach, broccoli, even green peas have good amounts of calcium in them. Most of us have been I don't want to say brainwashed, but we've been influenced by the milk industry in thinking that dairy products are the only or the best place to get our calcium intake for the day. And it's true that dairy has very good calcium in it, but so do plants. And when you eat your calcium sources from plant-based sources, then you get a lot of other vitamins that go around it, like the ones I'm putting up here, B vitamins, potassium, and magnesium. And that actually helps your body to absorb the calcium that you consume. I'll link a study for you that showed actually some of the countries that have the highest dairy intake have also the highest incidence of bone disease, which is counterintuitive. You would think if you're drinking more dairy, then you're going to have stronger bones because your bones need calcium. But what the authors of those studies remark is that people tend to rely overly or exclusively on dairy as their calcium source and neglect a lot of other things like fruits and vegetables that would actually help their body to absorb that calcium. So when you're getting the calcium directly from the plant-based source, then you don't have to worry about that. So soy is found in many different forms. Edamame is the first one that I have up there, and that's the top picture there. That's what the bean looks like when it's in its pod. And you may have seen edamame in like Asian restaurants. It's very tasty. You can get it. They put salt on it, and you don't eat the pod. It's a bit too fibrous, but you put it in your mouth and you pull out the beans that are inside. And with along with a little bit of salt or spice, it can be very tasty. It's a very good appetizer. Or you can also just take the beans directly out of the pod, and you can often find those in frozen vegetable sections. That's the least processed form of soy that you're going to find. It's the closest to its absolute natural state. The beans that we saw on the last page were just the same things, but that have been dried. Then probably something else that you've heard of, tofu, which you can see over there on the right. It's the white block. And tofu comes in a lot of different varieties. You can find soft tofu and firm tofu. Soft tofu is really great if you are making like a smoothie or something like that. You want to add it into something to mix it, or maybe put a little cacao powder and maple syrup, and you can make that into a dessert. But if you're trying to like actually cook with tofu, then I would recommend going with the firmer varieties. Those are the varieties that you can actually cut into cubes. If you take tofu and cut it into cubes and then just fry it up and add a little bit of sauce to it, then it can often taste very, very good. A lot of people have an aversion towards tofu because if you do try to eat it sort of in its raw state without any flavor, then it doesn't taste like very much. But it takes on the flavor of what you cook it with. So if you cook it with a little bit of onion or perhaps a little bit of cumin seed, or add a little bit of lemon on top afterwards, it can really enhance your enjoyment of it. And all that tofu is soy milk that has been coagulated. And tofu has been eaten in Asian cultures in particular for thousands of years. And it's a real staple part of people's diet, particularly in China and Indonesia. And then below the tofu there, you have what's called tempeh, which is basically taking the beans of the soya plant and letting them ferment. And so it's a slightly different variation than tofu, but it's also very good to cook with. It's very easy to cook with. You can find packages that already have flavors that have been marinated into it, or you can do your own marination. I spent a lot of time in Indonesia as well when I was younger, and I didn't know what tempeh was until I went there. In fact, when the first French Europeans came to Indonesia, they called tempeh la viande javanaise, the Javanese meat. And Java is the big island in Indonesia. And so it's widely consumed by the population there, and it is delicious, particularly if you marinate it with a little bit of soy sauce, and they really like to do it with peanut butter as well. And, you can find very easy recipes for marination online, and so you can experiment with tempeh as well. And then finally, we have over there soy milk. And soy milk is a great alternative to cow milk to put on your cereal or on your oats or however you take it. I do want to caution you, though, that a lot of soy milk companies, you see they have different varieties, original, vanilla, chocolate. Those varieties contain a lot of sugar and can actually maybe offset some of the health benefits you would get by massive amounts of added sugar. So I usually take the unsweetened version of whatever alternative milk. It could be oat milk, almond milk, or soya milk. And if you need it a little bit sweeter, then you can add in a little bit of sweetener like maple syrup or whatever you want. But in general, the sugar that's added to those other varieties is just, cane sugar. So it's really not very good for your health. So, they can be a good dessert drink. If you just want a drink of chocolate milk afterwards, great. That might be your thing. But if you want to have it more as like a staple part of your diet, then I would encourage you to get the unsweetened variety of those. So those are 4 of the main forms that you would encounter soy in the supermarket. So what to watch out for with soy? So First thing is processed soy products. This includes a lot of imitation meats, not all of them. Beyond Meat and Impossible, well, Impossible actually has soy in it, but Beyond Meat is made from pea proteins. So not every imitation meat is made with soy, but a lot of them are. And the problem there is not so much that it's made with soy, it's just that it's processed. Any processed food is going to lose nutrients along the way, whether it's processed meat or processed cookies or processed soy. And so just to say that, junk food is found in all forms, including vegan junk food. So the veggie dogs that I have up here, that might be a good treat from time to time, but I wouldn't recommend that to be a staple part of your diet that you would consume every day, because it's not very nutritious and there's a lot of added salt and a lot of the other problems that go along with processed foods. So just because you have a plant-based diet doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthier. You want to try to find foods in as close to the whole natural raw state as possible. One other thing that you want to watch out for, if you're thinking, wow, soy looks great, I'm just going to eat soy all the time, there is some concern that a certain amount of consumption could increase estrogen levels or certain cancers. And the reasons for this are complicated because soy actually contains a plant version of a precursor to our hormone estrogen. And that's why in the Harvard Public School of Health, a declaration that I put up at the beginning, they were talking about soy has been studied for its estrogen and anti-estrogen and, the various studies that have been done. And the bottom line here is, as the Harvard School of Public Health said, when it's eaten in moderation, soy has a protective effect against many cancers and can have a lot of health benefits. And when we say moderation, the Harvard Public School of Health said a couple times a week. I would even venture to say you could have soy on a daily basis, but maybe 2 or 3 servings tops. This really holds true of anything that you would eat. You wouldn't eat like more than 4 servings of chicken every single day, or you wouldn't eat more than, 4 servings of whatever it is every single day. And so you can have a little bit of soy, moderate amount, not too much, and there will be health benefits. A lot of the studies that I've seen linking soy to hormonal imbalances happened in populations that were consuming massive amounts of soy, 7 to 8 servings every single day. And so it's possible that, you could get that much if you're not watching out. But if you have a little bit of soy milk on your cereal in the morning and then some tofu for dinner, you should be absolutely fine there. And in fact, that's probably going to confer health benefits. And one of them, and you can look into the literature about this, is that men who consume soy daily had a 70% reduction in prostate cancer. And that's actually one of the top cancers for men. So there's a lot of benefits, a lot of cancer preventative elements of soy when consumed in moderation. But as I said, we're going to say that about any food that you eat. Then in terms of soy, some people have some environmental concerns. You may have heard that soy is responsible for the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. So you see a picture there of rainforest on the left and a soya plantation on the right. And a lot of the deforestation in the Amazon is being driven by the desire to plant more fields, in particular of corn and soya. But it's not necessarily for the reason that you might think. Most of the soy production in Brazil, 80%, produces soybeans to go to non-human animal consumption. I have conception up there, I mean consumption. Cows, chickens, etc. So that means that the vast majority of the rainforest that's being cleared to make room for soya plantation is being done so that they can have more food to give to non-human animals. And in fact, 3/4 of the world's soy production is dedicated to livestock, which is a very inefficient way of producing protein. We'll talk about this later in the class, about how you have to take plants and give them to animals and then get the protein out of them, whereas you could just consume the plant directly. And so to produce the same amount of protein, a chicken would require 3 times more land than if you would eat the soy directly. Pigs would be 9 times and cows 32 times. You need 32 times more land to produce a gram of protein that comes from a cow than a gram of protein that comes from a plant. So it's one thing that I'm not particularly concerned about my soy consumption destroying the Amazon. If I were eating animals that were fattened up on crops that were grown in the Amazon, then I would be concerned. I would be more concerned about that than eating it directly. Then finally, some people are asking questions about genetically modified organisms, GMOs, organic soy. And soy, by the way, is the #1 genetically modified crop in the world. In fact, almost all soy that is grown has been genetically modified. And most of that genetically modified soy, again, goes to livestock. Now, it's a very large topic, and I don't want to go into it here. But by and large, in terms of the scientific consensus about genetically modified organisms, there has been very little, if any, scientific studies that have demonstrated that these are harmful for human health. That's not to say that they aren't. Maybe we will do a study that will show that in the future. Science is always evolving. But the current state of scientific understanding is that genetically modified crops are by and large safe. But if you have your personal concerns about genetically modified soy, then there's a simple way around it. You can buy organic. A lot of the products that I showed you a couple of slides ago are available in organic varieties. There are a lot of organic soy companies that exist here in Quebec. Natura soy milk is organic. And there's several tofu companies that you can find at IGA, Metro, other supermarkets that are organic, and those are not GMO. So it might be a personal choice for you there. There's pretty simple workaround to it. So that's it for soy right now. If you have any questions more about soy, then let me know. But this has been just a general introduction, and I hope that maybe you'll experiment with it and maybe try to replace one meal, 2 meals in your diet with one of the varieties of soy that I mentioned. And if you need recipe suggestions, we're going to get to some of those. I'll hook you up with some resources, and don't feel afraid to experiment on your own. It took me many weeks, many months, even many years to really learn how to cook tofu in the way that I like it. So everybody's going to be different in that regard, and the best thing to do is just experiment for yourself.